Hello, I'm John Bruner from Carbon. We're here today to discuss automated digital workflows for medical devices. Digital tools are changing the way that just about everything is designed and produced, and medical devices are a really exciting part of this. Custom medical devices that are produced with these new digital tools promise to improve outcomes and patient experience. But in order to create really good custom medical devices, you need to have an excellent workflow that begins with high quality data, goes through a sophisticated design process, perhaps including some automation to make it more feasible, and ends in a really high quality production system. That could be a 3D printer, for instance, that's tied into the entire workflow. In today's session, we have three different companies represented from the data side, the design side, and the production side. And we have an expert or two from each of those companies that's going to walk through the workflows encompassed in their field and talk about how the entire workflow comes together across these three stages. After we have a brief presentation from each of our presenters, we'll go into a Q&A type discussion. And I just want to let you know at the outset that you can enter your own questions for our panelists using the chat window in the presentation platform here. Just type it in, and after the initial presentations, I'll start to read through some of the questions that we received from the audience and pose them to the panelists. Our first speaker is Celia Butler from Synopsys. Synopsys is the data side of the workflow that I mentioned. Celia is a senior application engineer, and she's also an honorary senior lecturer at the University of Exeter. Celia, we're really pleased to have you here. Take it away.
Thanks for the introduction, John. So I'm Celia, and I'm going to be discussing the first section of this seamless workflow for the design and fabrication of a patient-specific surgical guide. So this stage focuses on allowing us to process the image data from the patient and turn it into an accurate computer model, which can then be used for the design and the planning in the following stages. So to do this, we're going to use Simpleware Scan IP from Synopsys. Now, Synopsys is a global company with interests in a range of software, amongst other solutions. Synopsys is now over 15,000 people spread across the globe in over 120 offices. I work for the Simpleware product group, and we develop and sell 3D image processing software and services. And we work with customers in a range of industries, including clinical and life sciences. Within the clinical and life sciences arena, we cover areas from patient-specific implants to wearable electronics, and you can see some examples here on the screen. So the Simpleware software solution is a platform called Simpleware Scan IP, and it allows you to import a range of different image data from CT, MRI, and more. And you can visualize this data, filter it, process it, and then segment it to create models of the parts that you're looking for. You can also use the measurement tools, things like metrology and statistics tools, to inspect that data that you have available, and you can use that to influence your design. You can also integrate different modalities within the same project, so you can have CT and MRI as well as maybe a CAD model. And you can combine these and generate models and meshes for 3D printing or CAD or simulation, and that's what we're going to see here today. Now, although the process that I'm going to talk about today focuses on a single patient-specific process, this could be fully automated to process many, many more patients with little or no user interaction by using a combination of our AI-based segmentation modules and also our scripting capability. So now we're just going to focus on the Simpleware 3D image-based workflow. So today I want to demonstrate this simple process that we're using, and here you can see an overview of the workflow. So first of all, we're going to import the patient data. Now this is in the form of a CT scan, And then we're going to perform any image processing that might be required. So in this particular example, we don't need any processing. The image data is good, but maybe there's a bit of background noise. And so maybe you need a bit of filtering, for example. Then we're going to perform a segmentation. So segmentation is essentially selecting the parts of the image that correspond to the bones that we're interested in this example. And then we're going to generate an accurate model of this particular patient's knee anatomy. And then we're going to go to this analysis and reporting stage. Now, this could cover a lot of areas, from anatomical landmarking to measurements which might inform the design of the device, or in this case, the cutting guide. So those could be angles or distances, maybe you do some shape fitting in there as well. So once we have all these parts, we can then export them to Entopology, and they can start the patient-specific design process. Now, at Synopsys, we've been working with customers in patient-specific device design for some time, and we soon identified the need for an automatic segmentation tool. This is by far the biggest bottleneck in the process. So we've developed a series of auto segmenters specifically for orthopedics. So this module is called AS Ortho, and it consists of 4 different auto segmenter and landmarking tools, which are anatomy and image modality specific. So these are for the ankle, the knee, and the hip, and you can see them on the right-hand side of the screen there. So today we're going to focus on the knee CT tool, and that's what I'll be demonstrating in a moment. So this tool is powered by AI technology with machine learning algorithms, and it provides a speed up of between 20 and 50 times faster as a sort of rate of segmentation. And this means that previously very tedious work is reduced or even eliminated to really free up that engineering time and computational resources, which can be used for other analysis or innovation. So the tool, it can be used on the left or the right knee or both at the same time, and it accurately segments the femur, the tibia, the fibula, the patella, and any flabella that may be present. In addition, it automatically identifies landmarks on the femur, tibia, patella, and fibula as well. The benefits of using the Simpleware AS Ortho tool are really that it's a fully automated solution. You'll see in a second it's a one-click solution that really eliminates hours of manual processing. It's fast and it's effective. You can get results in between 1 and 3 minutes on a standard engineering specification laptop. It's really reliable and accurate. So the Simpleware machine learning algorithms are trained by experts and verified by clinical professionals. It's also secure. So we're protecting your patient data by keeping it on your local hardware. You don't need to transfer confidential data onto outside servers in order to be processed and sent back. It's consistent and repeatable. And this means that you eliminate inconsistencies between users, so you don't need that multiple review that happens so often. It's also scalable, so you can do 1 patient or you can do 50 patients. You can efficiently process large numbers of data sets so much faster. And this really frees up engineering time for more complex tasks or high value tasks. So I've talked a lot about this. Let's actually go and see it in action. So here we have the interface for Simpleware Scan IP Medical. And what we're going to do is just import the image data. In this case, it's in the form of a DICOM file. That's one of the most commonly used formats for this data. So we can just check the DICOM tags and we can see that this has been anonymized. And then we can import the data. And you can see that this CT data is visualized as 2D slices in 3 orthogonal directions. And you can just see, as we scroll through, you can see the bones in white there. We can also generate a volume rendering. which you can see on the bottom right there as well. So now we can go through the process of segmentation. So we're going to be using the knee CT tool, which is part of the AS Ortho module. You can see how quickly we set that up. You just open the tool and click apply. There are more advanced options to set your region of interest, say to one knee or part of the scan if you're using a whole leg scan, for example. And once this is finished, we'll see a summary box which shows all the parts that were segmented and the landmarks that were detected. Now we can inspect the parts that were segmented. You can see the bones here, and they're solid objects now, so they're ready to be meshed or exported. You can also see the landmarks. You can see all of them there, but we're just going to concentrate on the tibia, as that's where we're going to create our knee cutting guide. So if we just focus on one of them, you can see that we've got the landmarks for the medial, lateral, posterior condyles, the intercondyle tubercles, and also the tuberosity and the shaft center. And we can export all of these landmarks as a series of coordinates. So now we're just going to switch project file, and you can see that we've got the bones that we were interested in, but I've converted them to surface objects, and we're going to use our 3D printing toolkit. You can see the mask to surface option that I used to generate these surfaces, and also the embossed text tool. So this is really useful to add a logo or a patient ID for traceability. So you can see that this is just placed, in this case on the tibia, and we can emboss that on the surface. And we can export those as an STL or a 3MF or even a 3D PDF, which can be really useful for planning too. So that brings our demo to an end. So just as a quick summary, I wanted to bring up this workflow slide again, just to recap. We imported the patient's CT image data of their knee. We segmented it using the knee CT tool from Simpleware AS Ortho, and we exported both the model and the landmarks ready for Entopology to use in their design process. So now I'd like to pass back to John and then to Christopher, who will explain the design process of that patient-specific cutting guide.
Thank you so much, Celia. We move now into the design stage with Entopology, and our presenter is Christopher Cho, a senior application engineer at Entopology, who will tell us about not just the process of designing the device around the patient data, but also options for automating the design process. Christopher.
Thanks, John. Entopology's contribution to this cutting guide design workflow is enabled by the fantastic capabilities of Synopsys because we rely on high quality and accurate meshes coming into our software, and the Synopsys Simpleware product group provides exactly that. So I want to start off by thanking the Synopsys team for making this data handoff a super seamless process. That being said, my name is Christopher Cho, Senior Application Engineer at Entopology, focusing on medical device design and manufacturing. As of today, we are a team of just over 100 supporting advanced manufacturing with our worldwide presence. For those of you not too familiar with us, Entopology is a geometry design and management platform able to create complex and organic shapes with unprecedented ease due to our use of cutting-edge implicit modeling technology. While traditional CAD tools use boundary representations where the sheer quantity of surfaces and curves can become too difficult to manage, implicit modeling enables high-speed model regeneration and conformal design capabilities that complement the CAD ecosystem and ensure designers can fully leverage advanced manufacturing processes. Entopology's three major pillars of differentiation are the ability to regenerate geometry in an unbreakable way, our field-driven design approaches, and our endlessly reusable design workflows that allow traceability and scalability throughout the entire design process. Despite our prevalence in a variety of industries, such as aerospace and defense, automotive, consumer products, as well as heavy, Entopology is making leaps and bounds in the medical device industry when it comes to ensuring that design engineers are fully equipped to provide the best patient outcomes. Whether it be implantable orthopedics such as joint replacement, spinal cages, or extremities, or even externally conforming devices such as prosthetics, orthotics, or surgical guides, Entopology has designed solutions for all of the above and more. Now, at a really high level, when it comes to representing geometry, implicit modeling is simply using a different method to achieve the same shape as you would get from a traditional CAD package. The primary difference here is the ability to do so in an extremely lightweight and efficient manner. So in the case of a singular lattice unit cell, the benefits may be negligible. However, at scale, because a solution like lattice structures are always applied at scale, the benefits become more and more apparent in terms of efficiency of management, and ultimately, the usability of complex geometry like this becomes actually accessible. If you have heard of topology, it is very likely you are familiar with our capabilities regarding lattice structures. But topology's ability to accommodate complex and organic shapes, such as patient-specific bone scans, means that the software also excels at creating conformal geometry that can be more accurately tailored to a unique patient outcome. So, a design like today's tibia cutting guide follows very similar principles to our approach of creating conformal bone plates. Now, as I said before, the success of topology relies on high-quality mesh data from Synopsys. From there, the topology design workflows reference this mesh data to create a patient-specific and conformal solution. And Carbon ultimately closes the loop by manufacturing a high-quality component using their cutting-edge manufacturing technology. So how does topology actually work with the Synopsys tibia mesh to create a conformal cutting guide? Well, the first step is segmentation and conversion. Topology is able to bring in mesh data in a wide variety of formats, including STLs, OBJs, and 3MFs. With the Synopsys STL, we split up the bone assembly received and isolate out the target bone, which in this case is the tibia, and we perform a conversion from a mesh model to an implicit model. If the mesh is watertight and of high quality, which the Synopsys files of course are, the conversion is a seamless one-to-one process with no loss in data or tolerance. Now that we have the target shape, creating a conformal shell in reference to this implicit tibia is as easy as using our built-in shelling functions. But it is important to include design indications that the shell needs to be outside of the part with a sufficient air gap in between. However, we don't want to keep the shell from the entire bone. So the next step is to designate the desired regions using our Boolean operations and ensuring only the areas we want to keep are what remain. Now, while conformal solutions are almost always winning solutions, they don't necessarily accommodate manufacturability right out of the gate. I worked closely with the Carbon team to create some support columns and a base structure that would minimize the amount of sacrificial supports required to print this part. What made this process uniquely easy for us was the ability to effortlessly change design variables such as column height, conical radii, and the base structure parameters. Knowing that the topology software would regenerate geometrically valid results 100% of the time made the iterative process of Carbon completely pain-free as we narrowed in on the most optimal results. Towards our last few iterations, we realized that implementing venting channels in the base structure would make manufacturability on the Carbon platform even easier. Even then, adding that defan feature into the cutting guide was not disruptive to our design process in the slightest. Now, the cutting guide component itself was very easy to create and very easy to modify, as parameterizing the material thickness and cutting tool clearance is a standard operating procedure when it comes to designing an topology. Using the Boolean operations, blending this cutting guide component into the conformal component was just as pain-free. However, a critical component to locating the cutting guide component was ensuring that we were targeting the right region of the tibia at the right angle. Though there are a few ways this could be accomplished, the easiest method was to lean on the Synopsys team and their landmarking process by importing in the desired reference points via a CSV file and using these imported points as the cutting guide target. By combining these landmarks with a designated insertion point, a 3-point plane is created and the cutting guide component can be properly located in reference to this data. The final feature required in this part are drill guides to accommodate temporary bone fixation. As is usual, we parameterize the hole size and material thickness in case any variation in design is needed in the future. In the case the insertion angle or location of these drill guides needs to be adjusted for future iterations or for new patient cases, making those changes are just as easy as modifying the endpoints of the insertion vector. With the cutting guide geometry complete, it is just a matter of creating an optimal mesh for Carbon to manufacture. Even though STLs are ubiquitous across the additive manufacturing industry, 3MFs are even more efficient when it comes to file size, and that is our recommended mesh format of choice when the downstream manufacturing process allows for it. Now this design workflow that we've created is not exclusive to this specific tibia. It has been designed in such a way where replacing the reference bone with another patient's tibia will allow the workflow to seamlessly regenerate a completely unique cutting guide in compliance with the new patient's bone. If I were to adjust the designated point of insertion, Entopology would procedurally recalculate the cutting guide insertion vector, recalculate the cutting guide plane, and seamlessly regenerate the cutting guide component, adjusting all of the DFAM features along with it. So we'll just give this a few seconds to run. So hitting the undo button really quick, going back, going forward, going back, and going forward. And that at its core is the beauty of the Entopology design workflow. Any portion of the workflow can see adjustment, allowing for case-by-case modifications based on each patient's needs, whether it be the landmark references, cutting guide insertion point, drill guide vectors, or even the desired tibia region itself, ensuring that a single robust design workflow can work for a wide range of variations enables not just repeatability, but complete automation of a design workflow that can massively reduce engineering time and spend. On that note, this ends the Entopology portion of this webinar, and I'd like to pass the reins over to the wonderful Carbon team to discuss the manufacturing portion of this end-to-end workflow.
Thanks, Christopher. We're going to move on now to the production stage and talk with my colleagues at Carbon about 3D printing in the medical device field. We have two speakers from Carbon who work in our healthcare group and are experts in this field. Steve Pollock is a science fellow at Carbon, and Allison Burrell is a senior applications engineer at Carbon. Steve and Allison, we're pleased to have you with us.
Thanks, Chris and John. This is Steve Pollock. I'm senior technical lead for life sciences, a science fellow at Carbon. Myself and Allison Burrell, a senior application engineer, are going to talk to you about the next phase of this project and the digital workflow moving from image data all the way to a final product using Carbon's technology at the last stage. Just an overview of Carbon. Carbon's been around since about 2013, so about 7 or 8 years now. Founded in 2013 back in North Carolina, and now headquartered in Redwood City, California, with an employee base of nearly 500, over 500 employees. Almost $700 million raised in investment capital from some amazing investors, both in the investment world and also strategic investors and partners. The Carbon platform is actually a threefold platform where we intersect hardware, software, and materials. We build the printers and the post-processing equipment for the construction of objects on our technology. We develop that software both for controlling the printers, the workflow, and for the design of objects that would be printed on our hardware. And finally, we've developed the materials and some unique approaches to 3D printing materials that allow for a variety of applications and physical properties. Just the world of 3D printing comes sort of in two very large buckets, those of heat generated and light generated. Heat generated technologies are FDM and SLS. You melt a polymer and extrude it in a thin ribbon onto a substrate and then onto its precursor layers. Or you take a powder material, you sinter by softening the surface and getting integration. The two processes have their limitations. The resolution is only moderate because of solidifying liquid on top of solid or consolidating solid particles with a thin liquid film or softened film. You get high anisotropy in the Z versus XY direction. And in the case of SLS, you get high porosity. But these materials have their place and their use. On the light-based technology, we're taking a photopolymer and using photochemistry to turn it into a solid where light is applied, either from a DLP system, a digital light projector, or with a dancing laser beam. In the case of vat polymerization, you have to commit a large volume of resin, a photopolymer, and you create your object at the air-liquid interface and pull the part down into it. There's an inverted geometry like we use at Carbon, where you instead project your image through a window into the liquid. The latter has the problems associated with adhesion to the window. Part of Carbon's technology is getting rid of that by using oxygen as a inhibitor at the window. The polyjet technologies are spraying a small image of photopolymer and photopolymerizing it layer by layer. The problem with the photopolymer technologies and the pure photopolymer technologies is the materials are typically low temperature applications. They can be UV sensitive and they're generally brittle. There are exceptions. At Carbon, we've tried to find a way to bridge these two worlds of high mechanical properties and good part fidelity. And we do this by dual cure. So dual cure, we recognized that we could take all of the benefits of photopolymerization and creating high resolution, high fidelity objects using a photochemistry and mix in a latent thermochemistry. So you look at the resin cartridge on the left and you see a two-part resin, much like you'd be experiencing in a variety of thermosetting chemistries, epoxy, cyanate ester resin, polyurethane thermosets. And we separate them from the photochemistry. So as we move from left to right, we have the resin, it's mixed. We put it into the printer, we expose to light where we want solidification to occur to create what we would call a green cured part, or a green part rather. It's been photo cured, has only moderate mechanical properties, but it has great shape fidelity. We then take that through a thermosetting bake cycle, programmed cure cycle to create now what is the true mechanical and chemical and physical properties of the polymer, and it gives us a lot more breadth of use. Today, we're going to talk primarily about the transition from digital idea to final physical part using one of our resins, MP100. I'm going to let Allison talk about what comes next. Off to you.
Thanks, Steve. As Steve mentioned, my name is Allison Burrell, and I'm an applications engineer at Carbon, focusing on MedTech. And now let's dive back into our tibia cutting guide workflow. As a recap, first we heard from Celia at Synopsys, and she demonstrated how to use Synopsys Simpleware software to import anatomical scan data and export a 3D model of the tibia, including metadata such as landmarks and an embossed part ID. Then Chris shared how to import the 3D model of the tibia into Entopology and how to use that 3D model of the tibia to design a patient-specific cutting guide. Finally, the patient-specific cutting guide is exported from Entopology, and we're ready to produce physical parts on the Carbon platform. I'll walk us through how to do that. As Steve mentioned, the Carbon platform includes hardware, software, and materials. So one of our first considerations is selecting our hardware. What I'm showing on this slide is the Carbon lineup, which includes the M series printers, the Smart Part Washer, and the L series printer. More details on Carbon's hardware offerings can be found on our website, but for the tibia cutting guide application, we will focus on the M2 printer and the Smart Part Washer. I'll share more details on the next two slides. The M2 printer is what we selected for producing the tibia cutting guide. The cutting guide geometry is a good size to fit on the M2 platform, and the resolution of the M2 printer also meets our product requirements. The M2 printer and all Carbon printers provide the benefit of printing with our patented dual cure engineering grade materials that Steve described earlier. The M2 printer is a modern piece of industrial equipment with over 24 onboard sensors that monitor everything from environmental conditions to build parameters. In addition to reliably and repeatably printing the parts on the M2 printer, the Smart Part Washer is Carbon's solution for reliably and repeatably cleaning parts. The Smart Part Washer provides consistent, predictable, and thorough part cleaning. There is an RFID chip on the M2 platform, which can be read by the Smart Part Washer, and this maintains the digital thread from printing to post-processing, which makes the M2 and Smart Part Washer combination an excellent solution for producing medical devices, such as our tibia cutting guide. Now that we've covered hardware, let's move on to material selection. This slide gives an overview of Carbon's wide variety of material offerings. The full list of materials is available on Carbon's website. As you can see on the slide, the carbon MPU 100 material was developed specifically to be well suited for medical device applications. One example of a medical device that is produced in MPU 100 is S4 Medical's eSolution device, which is pictured on the slide. The device is used to control the position of the esophagus during catheter ablation procedures. I wanted to highlight how S4 Medical worked with carbon production partner Resolution Medical, and they selected the carbon MPU 100 material because it meets the needs of their application, which includes contact with the esophagus. The decision to produce parts with carbon allowed S4 Medical to shorten their design cycle, and the device is currently in early clinical trials. If you're interested in learning more about this application, the full case study can be found on the Carbon website. But getting back to our tibia cutting guide application, one of our material requirements is biocompatibility. As you can see summarized in the table, most carbon materials pass initial biocompatibility testing. MPU 100 is unique in that in addition to passing ISO 10993-5 and -10, MPU 100 is also a USP Class 6 material. MPU 100 was designed for bone contact, which makes it a good material choice for the tibia cutting guide. Another requirement for the tibia cutting guide application is sterilization. Carbon materials are compatible with multiple sterilization methods. The carbon DLS process is fully dense, so parts printed in MPU 100 can be sterilized without concern for porosity or excessive leachables. In addition to compatibility with cold sterilization methods, MPU 100 is also compatible with steam sterilization. So we have that product requirement covered. Now that we've established that MPU 100 meets our product requirements, let's talk about printing parts. The carbon DLS process creates a consistently accurate finished part with perfect fit. And this is in part due to the Carbon software. Carbon recently announced updated accuracy guidelines, and more details can be found on the Carbon website. General accuracy refers to the accuracy that can be expected from a first print. As you can see for MPU 100, the general accuracy is expected to be within plus or minus 75 microns, plus 1 micron per millimeter dimension size, which is more than adequate for our tibia cutting guide. The production repeatability refers to the expected accuracy after reducing variation and optimizing for production. And in this case, we'd expect a tolerance of plus or minus 55 microns for MPU 100. We've covered the hardware and material selection, and we've talked in more detail about accuracy. So now we're ready to print the part. And this slide shows the steps involved in printing a part on the Carbon platform. The first step is file prep, and I'd like to point out that the Carbon UI has seamless integration with different file formats. Users can upload various file formats, including STL, 3MF, OBJ, and PLY, directly into the Carbon UI. For traceability, the Carbon UI also has a part labels tool, which can be used to add a unique patient ID to the cutting guide by embossing or engraving on the part. In fact, it would be possible to use metadata from the Synopsys file carried forward by Entopology to allow us to link the unique part ID from the anatomical model to the 3D model of the patient-specific cutting guide. Once file prep is complete, the next steps include printing, washing, baking, and inspection. To demonstrate these steps, I'll play a short video. So this video shows the steps involved in printing our cutting guide. The first step is to upload and orient. So we're uploading the file to the Carbon UI and selecting MPU 100 from the material dropdown. And then we are orienting our part. This part was designed with a nice flat surface to print directly on the platform. And we can use that snap to platform tool to easily orient it. And the next step is to add supports. So I'm going into our supports tool and selecting patch supports. So I can apply bar supports to a selected overhang area and generating those supports. And now I'm selecting a different overhang, and I'm using the boundary fence feature in that patch supports tool and generating a boundary fence. And finally, I'm using our fence supports tool, and I'm adding fence supports to 2 additional features, and then generating those supports. And now our supports are complete. So we're going to position and duplicate the parts on the platform. So going into our layout tool, I'm going to rotate the part 90 degrees in the x-axis, and then duplicate the part and rotate it 180 degrees. And now we're ready to analyze and queue our print. So starting our print analysis, we can see that the print is 2 hours and 25 minutes, and I'm adding it to the queue. So now we'll start the print after dispensing resin, and the print can be started on the printer like is shown in the video. We can also start the print from the Carbon UI. And so after those 2 hours and 25 minutes, we've finished our print and we are ready to wash the parts on the Smart Part Washer. I'm loading the M2 platform directly into the part washer and starting the print, or starting the wash. Once the wash is complete, we can remove the platform from the part washer, and then we'll remove the parts from the platform and remove supports from the part. And once we're finished with that, we're ready to bake the parts. And so the parts will go through this thermal cure step. And once they're finished baking, we'll have our finished part. And so this part is now ready for inspection, sterilization, and packaging. So we hope that this gives you all an understanding of how to create automated digital workflows for medical devices using Synopsys and topology and Carbon. And now I'll pass it back to John.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much to all three of our presenters for kicking us off. We have some good questions coming in through the Q&A. Remember, if you have a question, type it into the question box that you see in GoToWebinar, and it'll eventually make its way to me, and then I'll ask the panelists. So let's begin with a question for Steve and Allison about these materials. Would this cutting guide actually be shipped pre-sterilized from the production facility, or would it be shipped unsterile and autoclaved at the hospital?
Steve, good question. I think it could go either way. I think we would be able to ship a part that was cleaned, ready for use, and non-sterile, and do point of care sterilization with a flash steam cycle. We've tested the material in these sorts of geometries, and it's perfectly reasonable to do a flash steam and not see any change in geometry. But alternatively, if there was essentially a central point of manufacture, you could do it with ethylene oxide and then ship it packaged, ready to go.
Got it. Do you see our Carbon printers ever installed directly at hospitals?
We've not seen that yet, and I think that's a growing question that around the industry is what's point of care printing going to look like? What we expect more likely is they're going to be hubs and service providers that can interact with the hospital using the software you've seen today to then generate the part that they ship to the hospital. But we'll see.
Right. Excellent. Let me go back to a question for Celia. Does the AI algorithm for AS ortho segmentation work for pediatric cases with large non-ossified bone?
So it's really depends on the quality of the image data. So what I'd say is send us the data and let's see what we can do. We've trained the AI algorithm on a range of different data cases, or I should say patient cases, and we're willing to have a go. What I would say is we've had some challenging revision cases, slightly different. They sometimes have metal involved in them, or other deformities caused by previous surgery. And although maybe we haven't been able to automate the full process, we've been able to take away maybe between 60 and 80% of the work, leaving you just a sort of tidying up stage rather than starting from scratch. So I'd say definitely get in touch with us, send us your case, and let's give it a go.
Great. And we have a couple of questions that are related to how you would modify a guide like this from a couple of angles. So I guess beginning with Chris, the question is, the knee joint is often replaced due to wear over decades, but the processes that we've seen in this webinar simply duplicate the worn out knee joint. How would you use entopology to compensate for joint wear?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and I think that's kind of around the space where entopology can provide support in terms of working with the conformal geometry and making presumptions on where you would want to build additional material to provide that additional support. But at its core, that is insight and knowledge that the user or the surgeon or whatever medical professional using the software is would provide the influence of where that geometry would be. Entopology would not intrinsically know where to put that. There's no AI built into that process. It's more of a tool that allows someone to properly locate that geometry in an easier way.
Got it. And for Steve and Allison, how at the point of printing or preparing for printing, or maybe during the design process, talk about how a surgeon might modify the design for the cutting guide in order to suit the surgeon's own sort of experience and preference.
I can take that, but I think it's actually a question to all three entities on here, because the surgeon's going to ask a question with what Christopher said. Let's say we have a patient with lots of bone, very low density bone. Well, the points where they do their attachment may not be with the standards, so they might make a comment, I need to change the attachment points. That would be based perhaps on what Celia sees in the CT data, and Christopher's organization could then reposition those. So we would take whatever came through at that point. So it really is more about what the STL file is. So that one really ends up more at the, if you will, at the design stage.
Okay. Yeah, Celia
Yeah.
and Chris, what are your, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to add a comment. So Christopher worked with us to design this cutting guide to have require minimal supports. The design is very flexible, and so I think that's one of the advantages is, you know, we could work with a surgeon to design a cutting guide to meet their needs. This example cutting guide we designed with that flat surface, like I pointed out, which makes it easier to print. And then Christopher also designed in those support columns that are integrated into the guide to eliminate the need to add supports manually. So some of the considerations for MP100 we would consider is creating self-supporting features. So for MP100, it can support a 3mm overhang and a 6mm bridge. So that was a consideration in selecting the diameter of those cones. And then it can also support angles up to 40 degrees from the horizontal or self-supporting. So those are some of the considerations.
Yeah, we also had a question from the viewers about automating the supports workflow, and I think that's a really good point, that when you, in a lot of cases, in a lot of the most notable applications for, you know, Carbon's technology at scale, things like the Adidas midsoles and bike seats for Specialized, the parts are designed to require no supports whatsoever. And so if you have that, if you have the design constraints of the process in mind when you go in, you can design something to print without supports at all. And that's really the most efficient way to automate away the supports, rather than creating an automated process for adding, you know, additional supports. So you can sort of do that in the end top stage. We have a question about knee geometry specifically. Are most persons' knees such perfect mirror images that the simple mirroring of the cutting guide within the Carbon UI satisfies the fitting requirements? Do you use the Synopsys, does Synopsys software flag cases where sufficient surface differences from left to right require separately prepared guide details to be prepared through NTOP? So this winds up going to all of you, actually.
I think I can
add a comment.
Oh, sorry. I'll just start very quickly to say that most knee geometries are different. So when we go through the segmentation process, the AI algorithm is looking for specific parts on each knee. It's not, there's no sort of mirroring there at this stage. But then when we go on to later in the process, I guess tailoring comes into effect. But we are talking about patient-specific knee guides, and that's specific to each knee. Sorry, Alison.
Yes, and so I just wanted to comment, in the video, it might have been confusing. I was actually duplicating. That was not mirroring. So that there were two of the same part on the platform. So that's just showing printing two of the same part at the same time. If you were doing a left and right cutting guide, you would upload each unique part and you could print them both at the same time.
I would just add that the practicality of printing two is it's virtually no more cost in the print time. And the reality of operating theaters is sometimes things drop. So having a pair of guides handy just makes time in the OR smaller.
We have a couple of questions related to how data is handled and certifications. So I'd love to have all of you comment on this. When is it necessary to send patient data to the cloud? And are these platforms certified by the FDA or by other certifying bodies? Why don't we start?
I guess I can start with the patient data. So the Simpleware Scan IP platform is run locally on your computer. So no patient data needs to leave your hardware. Now, that's not to say that if you're working in a hospital setting, you might have dedicated hardware to run this kind of solution, in which case you're still within your secure environment. You don't need to send the patient data out to, say, our external servers or somebody else's external servers to do that processing. It all stays within the hardware that you have available. So there's no problem there about sending data outside. Simpleware Scan IP Medical is FDA cleared, and if you check on our website, you can see all the certifications there. The AI algorithm that I showed you is slightly different, and that's for research and development purposes at this point. But if you want to have a look into that further, I'd say contact us.
Christopher, would you like to comment on patient data and certifications? Yeah,
absolutely. In terms of patient data, everything is done locally. There's no computation that's done in the cloud. And also in the same vein of things as Synopsys, whatever node or terminal you're doing your computation, you're processing on, it's going to be isolated to that black box, and no patient data will leave that. In terms of the clearance and validation side of things, Entopology as a software platform or software package is not pre-validated in any way. Typically, those who integrate the software into their design workflow is going to be validating from a larger or grander scope as a part of your design workflow. That's typically the most seamless way to implement this kind of geometry generation into the workflow. So that's been successful for us so far. If you have any further questions, though, feel free to send me an email. We can talk about it more in depth further.
Excellent. All right, and Steve and Allison, tell us about where the data lives.
The data in our system lives in the printer. File arrives, it's processed in the printer. The only patient-related information might be a patient ID, but that's anonymized, so we don't get to know who the patient is. It's a simple number. So again, HIPAA is not broken in any of these processes. In terms of certification, in terms of materials, these aren't materials that get FDA clearance because they're not considered a medical device as such. The total product is. So the process flow would end up being developed by somebody wanting to work with the three entities simultaneously and create a certified process. The resins have been tested by certified laboratories, and we have those certifications on the file. In fact, you can look on the website again to look at the ISO 10993 data clearances that we have for the resins.
Excellent. We have a couple more questions here, but we may have time for one or two additional questions as well. So if you have those, just keep sending them into the question box in GoToWebinar. You can also, of course, email the panelists at the address here if you want to get in touch directly. Let's move to a question for Celia. Can Synopsys work with MRI data as well as what you've shown us here?
Absolutely. So here we've focused on a knee CT, a cutting guide that was designed from knee CT image data, but we also have an auto segmenter for knee MRI data. If you have another anatomy that you're interested in designing a device for, then probably best to initially check out our website, but then get in touch with us if you want to know more about automatic segmentation. But we also can use the standard platform to offer just manual or semi-manual segmentation, I should say.
Great. And we have one for Christopher as well. So looking at the workflow that you've built in NTOP and demonstrated here, how much of that would apply to a different bone or surgery entirely? If you have a library of base cutting guides, can you sort of drop them easily into other processes and other bones?
Yeah, I think it's Anthropology being a platform, you as a designer of the workflow itself, you have full control over whether or not you want that workflow to be, focused specifically on a knee, focused specifically on one side of the knee, left or right, or have it be extensible to a lot of different joints in terms of how you want to arrange your workflow design process. This workflow specifically is made for knees in general, so in theory, you could swap out any knee that you want to, it would regenerate, and that's not a problem. I would not recommend it for an elbow or a shoulder or any way, shape, or form like that, simply because it's a fundamentally different shape that you're starting from. A lot of the workflow design process is based on reference points, those landmarks that Celia gave us from the Synopsys side of things. These references are critical to accommodate when you're first designing that workflow. So in short, I would recommend the process being designing a workflow for every major component or joint area and just keeping it segmented like that.
Got it. We have, that takes care of it for the questions from the audience. So I'll ask each of you an open-ended question sort of to wrap up. Tell us about what you think is next. What's the next hot thing in your field when it comes to sort of next generation manufacturing and patient-centered fabrication, things like this, or something a little further afield? I know it's a tough question and you didn't see it coming, so I'll give you a second to think about it.
I'll take a stab at it. Somebody asked the question about putting this in the hospital setting. I think, the question is, how do we establish, we've got the formulating pharmacy in the hospital. How do we create the formulating forge, the service to create the actual object? And I think there's a lot of great regulatory questions around that and quality control questions. But I think if we can get past those, bringing the whole process from the collecting the data to creating the digital construct to printing to bringing it to the patient all at the same site, I think is huge. Places are already beginning to this. Mayo Clinic is looking at this, is sort of working around the edges of how to get to that stage, and I think other large healthcare institutions, and I think we'd all love to be part of that process.
Yeah, you can imagine that the entire workflow that you've seen here, there are service bureaus that will turn this around for you in less than a day, FedEx it to you by the 8 a.m. the next morning. But what you're describing, you could have one of these cutting guides ready within a matter of hours, right, from the moment of scanning.
I mean, I would parrot a lot of what Stephen is saying. The process itself for me, from being in the middle, upstream of manufacturing, downstream of the patient scan data, the process as a whole was fairly seamless on my part, and I can't imagine any logistical obstacles of getting this implemented on site at a patient care location. I think the only real obstacle here is figuring out the best way to get through regulatory, get through that validation process, to just kind of close the threads there.
Yeah, and I would second everything or third everything that's been said. I think this workflow is really exciting. I think the possibilities for patient-specific medical devices with the 3 platforms that we've shared with you today, I feel like there's so many possibilities. And so I think it will be exciting to see more of the medical devices produced in this digital workflow.
Yeah, I agree with all of you, and I think the only thing that I'd add is speed up. And we need to get things moving a lot faster. We've tackled at Synopsys, we've tackled the biggest challenge that we see, but actually we need to be looking at those tricky cases as well as the absolutely routine ones that we know that we can deal with right now. We have the workflow, we've showed it to you, but those tricky cases, those edge cases, revisions, if we can crack those as well, then that would be fantastic. And this workflow has the power to do that. So I think we have all the components here. Let's just make it happen.
Excellent. This is such a cool vision, and well, not even a vision, it's something that's here today. I mean, I think the magic of 3D printing to me, and the reason that I've enjoyed working in this field for a while now, is that you take something that's sort of conceptual, some bit of data, and turn it into a physical reality. And there's a sort of romance to that. And then when you see what that does in terms of patient outcomes, in terms of personalized therapies and treatments, it gets really exciting. So I'd like to thank all of our panelists today for this great discussion. And anyone who'd like to get in touch, you're welcome to use the email addresses that you see here. Just mention that you have a question about the webinar today, and we'll make sure that your note gets forwarded to the right expert for an answer. So thank you all. Steve, Allison, Celia, Christopher, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to our audience for joining us today as well, and for your great questions.
Thanks, John, and thank all.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.